Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by thelines.com, coming to you from the West Coast. Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we're looking at a Monday night slate with 7 games to choose from here in the NBA to kick off your work week. Definitely want to make sure to like and subscribe to that page. We've got a couple game videos up for you and our player props video that we're bringing you each and every weekday this season. Also want you to head to thelines.com, where we've got all of our great written content up there and our odds finder tool that you can use to make sure you're getting the best juice back on all those NBA bets you are going to make this season. In this one, we are going to kick things off with the Cavs trying to take advantage of the lowly Spurs. Nate, let's go ahead and jump into that 7-game slate and then talk about the Cavs and Spurs.
Yeah, 7 games and lots of injury news as usual on a Monday, with some back-to-backs here. But the Heat trying to bounce back. They're -3 at Indiana. The Nets, after resting Durant, -6 at Washington. Hawks are +8.5 at Memphis. Ja Morant questionable there. Thunder +8.5 at Dallas. They rested Luka in their last game. The Wolves are +4 at Portland. Those teams just played 2 nights ago. And then the Celtics trying to bounce back from that loss at the Warriors are -3.5 at the Clippers. That's the other game we break down for you. And then this one, I told you last night, get on Cavs -5.5. It's now -7.5. So they were not the only people to get your bets in early there. The total's up to 219. I also liked the over at 218, or the Cavs team total at 112. So depending on where you get that, could be a favorable number. Donovan Mitchell is questionable for this one, so that is a big deal in terms of the scoring, I think. But I mean, Cleveland should dominate this matchup, and I think the line is kind of exploitable because the Spurs are coming off 2 wins. One against the Rockets that we actually were kind of feeling, even though we're like, I can't bank on them, but I think they might actually try to steal this one because you can't lose them all. And then they had the stunner of the season, maybe their high watermark, which is a win in Miami with all the Heat starting lineup in there. Turns out it was Coach Popovich's anniversary coaching the team, so they won one for the Gipper there. Not saying it doesn't help having Doug McDermott, Josh Richardson, and Romeo Langford back to field an actual squad here. But there's still no Pirtle, no Bates-Diop. Jeremy Sochan is questionable here tonight. And look, the Cavs have this reputation as they have the best home record in the league, and they've struggled on the road. I mean, part of that was a long West Coast road trip that lots of East Coast teams struggle on. And part of it is just the level of competition. I mean, like, look at some of these losses. It was a bad loss against the Knicks, who are playing much better of late, though. Loss at the Raptors, twice at Milwaukee, those 3 on the road trip. And then their other 5 games, 2 covers against Detroit, cover against the Lakers. These are wins, too. Win and cover at Boston and at Chicago. So it's not like they can't get it done here on the road. And I mean, even if Mitchell's out, they do have Jared Allen in, and he's surprisingly been key for that offense as the vertical threat, the vertical rim stretcher, if you will. And they actually averaged 114 with him in there versus 102 without him, actually giving up 5 more points per game as well with a slightly faster pace. Maybe it's easier to get something going to the rim when you have him there, especially if it's just Garland and Allen. They're a little more comfortable with that like it was last year. And last year, the Cavs went over at a much higher rate on the road than at home, where they still have that league best defense. I mean, they've won 3 straight against the Spurs, even when the Spurs were trying to win games. 2 of those were in San Antonio. They scored about 115 a game, despite hitting less than 10 threes. And Garland, like I said, if he's the man tonight, he's been just fine in that role. 32 points per game, 7 assists on 60%. 57% splits in his last 3 against the Spurs. So they have not been able to check him. And I mean, we could just see the Spurs regress to where they were before this little 2-game blip, where they were the worst team in the league by far, had lost 15 of 16 with a -15 net, and 0-8 against the spread, 1-10 against the spread their last 11 at home, allowing 120 a game. So I think I just want to bank on the Cavs offense efficiency here. Whether that means take the game total over because the Spurs have a little bit more on O now, or that just means taking the Cavs to cover, or maybe teasing the 2 together so you can get Cavs back down at 5 or 4 with the total a little lower.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing here about the Cavs is what you mentioned. It's who they're playing when they're on the road. It's not just what they're doing when they're on the road. I mean, when they're at home, it doesn't matter. They're 12-2 straight up. They're dominating competition and scoring an ass ton of points, especially compared to what they were on offense last year. This year, they've just played really, really good teams on the road. As the away team, overall, they're 4-8-1 against the spread. Obviously, a terrible cover percentage, basically fifth worst in the league when they're just the away team. When they're the away favorite, they're fine. I mean, they're covering at a 500 rate, but they're also winning those games by about 8.3 points per game, and covering the spread by a couple more points as well, by about 4.5 points per game. So it's really just about if they're playing one of these best teams in the league when they're on the road versus not, and they did fine against a couple of those teams, as you mentioned, when they're playing good competition, including the Celtics, who they've handed 2 of their 6 losses to this season. So I mean, they're not necessarily playing they're playing up a little bit to their competition, and I would say probably down a little bit as well, but not so much so that you're afraid of this 7.5 point spread, as I said, covering by about 8.3 points per game when they are the away favorite. So they're handling business against teams that they should beat, and it's interesting to have Spida Mitchell out. It does scare me a bit when if they were to need this game in a way, if they were playing a team that was much better and they were really looking to win this game, that might scare me a bit more. But I would imagine that without him in, other guys looking to step up and really justify their time. I like these situations where you've got a star out with a good team playing a bad team, because there's not going to be too much reliance upon the star. You're going to see a bit more of that ball movement, and to be honest, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more pace and space, because Donnie Mitchell does like to take the ball up, let the offense get set, and then get into his stuff, regardless if it's in transition or not. I think for the Cavs, another interesting, obviously they don't score nearly as much on the road, but that's just because at home they've just been absolutely dominant. It's not exactly like on the road they've been poor. Their defense steps up enough on the road that they've been able to at least hang around, have near a 500 record. But it's the pace, obviously, and things of that nature that change when they're on the road, that really affect what they do. But yeah, like I said, that when you're playing with a 108.7 defensive rating, and with Jared Allen in, by the way, that actually goes down a little bit as well, as we know, then you've got to feel like pretty good about a situation where, once again, the Cavs are not going to have the probably most important piece in this game when you're talking about the way that the Cavs play, especially the way the Cavs play without Donnie Mitchell. Points in the paint, defending the paint, all that kind of stuff. Jakob Poeltl's not going to play in this game. He hasn't been exactly, he's been somewhat of a turnstile on defense. Maybe you wish he was playing if you're picking the Cavs. But, I mean, having your starting center not playing against a team with 2, all-star 7-footers, let's say, and soon to be all-star in Evan Mobley, then I just think there's too much of an advantage down low for the Cavs in this one, with or without Spida Mitchell, that even if they're not able to, score a ton of points in this one, they're going to be just fine, limiting what the Spurs are able to do. Yeah,
limiting them, that's exactly it. I mean, they might have the best interior defense over the last 2 years when they have both those guys in there. I mean, they do. Allen and Mobley are the best combo rim protectors. There's no other team that can throw out 2 elite rim protectors like that. It's why they're allowing the second fewest paints in the point. You know what I mean. Why they have the best defensive rating in the league this year. And their weakness is if you can spread them out and hit some threes. Well, Spurs are 24th in 3-point percentage and near the bottom of the league in attempts. And I mean, you look at their defensive rating, the metrics. I mean, they're terrible against everything. Even at home, where they're better in terms of their rating, it's still a 115 defensive rating. Still giving up nearly 120 recently, like I said, and they're 5-2 to the over when playing the East this year. So I mean, I think the over is in play again with the same approach with the Spurs, though. We don't know if they can come along. So that's why betting 112 on the Cavs in terms of their team total is something you could feel comfortable putting good amount of units on, even though it's minus 120 right now. I think there's a high probability they get to at least 113. And probably pull away late, because you come back to the tanking mentality. Spurs are dead last in fourth quarter scoring. In fourth quarter points allowed, 26th in scoring. And the Cavs are number 1 in second half scoring and fourth quarter scoring. They can just clamp down on this team that really doesn't have a go-to guy at all. And Cleveland's going to try to get over that hump that they haven't been able to get over on the road in terms of winning consistently. But like you said, they have been winning when they're favored.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the Cavs are still giving up 120 points a game at home, 119.6 at home for the Spurs. So, they're scoring basically 110 wherever they are. It doesn't really matter. Their offense is going to be pretty much what it is, no matter where they are or who they're playing at this point. But yeah, that defense at home so bad, and if they're not points in the paint, obviously we expect that to be completely dominated by Cleveland, and obviously limiting that as well. So if San Antonio is going to not be able to shoot the way that they have been, they're going to be in pretty big trouble, unless really the only way you see this game being pulled out is a monster performance from Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, and I'm not really feeling confident in that ability against this team. Keldon Johnson a little bit too undersized to be able to get those boards and stuff. So yeah, feeling really good about the matchup for the Cavs as well. And
Celtics minus 3.5 at the Clippers. Total actually down a point since I last looked, 224.5. Again, kind of like the over. I expect the Celtics to bounce back absolutely from your NBA Finals rematch where Tatum was held in check despite Andrew Wiggins sitting. But the Celtics, this has been their storyline all season, is trying to redeem that failure in the finals last year, and they've taken it out on the rest of the league. Clearly, they don't have the right buttons to push against the Warriors yet, or at least can't beat the Warriors on the road. I mean, the Warriors are a completely different team if they're visiting your building. But they can easily turn it around against the Clippers team that's mediocre at best. I mean, they only list Norman Powell as out right now, so I guess Kawhi and Paul George could play. You really never know. This is their first game back home after a 4-game road trip. They have 5 straight at home here. So it's not a heavy urgency situation. If they happen to lose to Boston or if they sit one of those guys, they got a back-to-back coming up later in the week. And Kawhi is not playing his full workload either. He's been there. He's played 8 games this season, and their offense has been a little bit better, defense as well. And they're 6-2 straight up, but I don't see a quality win in here. I mean, they beat the Lakers in the second game of the season, Pistons, Spurs, Jazz, all at home. Then they scraped by the Hornets and the Wizards, who were without Beal and LaMelo Ball, respectively, and then blew an 18-point lead in Orlando, lost in overtime. This, to me, Josh, has the feeling, even when they have their guys in, as a team that just will play it close with anybody, including the worst teams in the league. And so I do kind of worry that they'll be able to play the Celtics close, but 3 points is not a ton for a team posting record efficiency, for a team that's extremely motivated after what happened last time out. And is 4-1 straight up after a loss this year, 7-1 against the Western Conference, dominating everyone except the Warriors in that span. I mean, we just saw them smoke the Suns, who, by the way, beat the Clippers by 17 early in the season when they had both Kawhi and PG active. Kawhi's not all the way back. He's not the superstar Kawhi Leonard. I mean, don't expect him to lock up Tatum or anything. Even if you do, the Celtics obviously had that 1-2 punch. They had Jalen go off for 31 against the Warriors, even with Tatum struggling. Kept that one reasonably close. I don't think there'll be any let up from their offense, and I think the Clippers are undervalued right now from an offensive perspective because they've gotten those guys back and they've kind of ramped up the pace a little bit more. They've got their first 2 overs at home and played at a 103 pace in those last 2. Despite a lot, pretty good defensive rating against the Kings and Pacers, giving up 112, and obviously the Celtics are a much more efficient team than either of those teams. So I think, the over, if it continues to fall a little bit, 224, don't hate that. But really, I just want to bank on the Celtics bounce back here, even if it's a money line, because you are worried about, keeping it close with those 2 stars out there. I think the Celtics get this win.
Honestly, I think I'm attacking the total just as much as I am attacking, the Celtics' ability to beat this team. There's nothing here for me in terms of like Kawhi and what he's doing to really make me. There's nothing this team's doing at all. Like I just never know who's playing, and so as a result, I like even when I look at their stats and I look at individual game logs and things of that nature, I'm just kind of like I have to look at who is playing every single game. I can't just go look at a box score. I have to go look at a box score for who is actually playing each time, and that's really annoying. But all that said, I think the trends for this team, obviously we know much better on defense than they are on offense, especially when they don't have one or both of their two big guys in PG and Kawhi. Neither of them are listed on an injury report anywhere, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if they're going to play or not. You talk about Kawhi's game log this season, and yeah, he hasn't played a team. I mean, they played Phoenix. He played Phoenix in like the third game of the season. Other than that, every single team that they played, I guess Utah is surprising us with how good they are, although they've backslid a little bit. There's nobody that's better than Utah, basically, at that point, that he's playing against. It doesn't really tell us much. He's played 4 games at home, 4 games on the road. To me, I'm looking at that going, well, that means there's no real impact that he's having on this team to a large enough degree that we can say with him, without him, this is what will happen. In terms of, but what I can say is what they've done at home this season in general for the Clips, and that's been going under at a tremendous rate. As I wrote down, 2-11 to the over when they are at home. That's the fewest overs in the NBA. And then you look at Boston and the trend. Obviously, when they're at home, they're the best offensive team in the history of the league. When they're on the road, they are 3-11 to the over. So they're 3-10-1, however you want to put it. But that's the second fewest overs on the road as well, only to Milwaukee, whose defense on the road is impenetrable. But yeah, I mean, their road defense for Boston has been a lot better than their home offense, probably because they're just putting up like 130 at home and they don't care what happens on the defensive end. But they are number 3 in opponents' 2-point percentage, number 2 in free throw attempts allowed. This is all on the road, and number 1 in limiting opponent fast break points. They've also been increasing their points off of turnovers, which is a pretty big deal for them when we look at what their defense is doing, is how, if it's playing well, if it's clamping down on people, they're creating points off of turnovers. They're 13th in the league this season off of that, as opposed to being much better last season. But they've progressed all the way up to 6th most over their last 5 games in terms of getting points off of turnovers. The Clippers do not limit that. They allow that to happen at a pretty high rate, about bottom 5 in the league, which is a pretty big deal for how Boston likes to score points and how this game can really get out of hand really quickly. Because if Boston is not only stealing the ball and getting points off turnovers, if they're hitting threes in transition, or they're hitting threes in general, night, then this game is pretty much over at that point, and you can feel good about that. So I actually lean under 225. I mean, if you look at the Clippers' last roughly like 5 home games, that's where they go under. They've gone over, and they're in 5 in a row on the road, but at home, the Clips, under to the Kings, under to the Pacers, under to the Nuggies, they went over to the Jazz, but then under the Spurs and the Pistons, and the Nets and the Lakers. So if you look at their last like 8 road home games, they've gone over 1 time, and all the rest have gone under. And some of those spreads are right around what we're at here, 222, 221. Those spreads on the road for them have been really, really low, helping them go over as well. I would mention like 212 versus the Heat, 218 versus the Wiz, 216 versus the Magic, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, those teams are not the offensive team that the Celtics are, and I really don't want to make it seem like anybody can clamp down on the Celtics, but there are a decent amount of home road splits for the C's as well. Like we said, 11 fewer points scored on the road. Their defensive rating is a little bit worse, but not too much. It's also a little bit about the pace, allowing a bunch more free throws, etc. So, shooting fewer free throws are the Celtics. So their offense just takes a little bit of a step back. Their defense takes a step forward. All things that make sense when you look at just the fact that this team is sort of reliant on its offense in a way, that's what wins them games right now. That's not what they're able to rely on quite as much on the road. Hence all those unders and all the slower pace and the better defense on the road as opposed to at home for them, which has even gotten better as you were mentioning. Has gotten better over the course of their last 3 to 5 games. They've just been way better on defense as well. Something we talked about recently. So I'm fine with the 3.5 over a Clippers team that I don't trust, that I don't think has an identity. That their identity is like play really good defense, hope Zoo gets a ton of boards, and then PG can go off because we don't have Kawhi ever. And when they do that, they're able to beat the Orlando by like 5. So like, why would I feel good about them being able to hang with the Celtics, even if Kawhi's in there, not dominating like I don't think he will be able to yet?
Yeah, upon closer inspection, Josh is right. The under does seem like the better play here. I mean, Celtics are 4-0 to the under so far on this road trip, and part of that's because the total was so high at the Warriors. Part of that is also because they just completely shut down the Suns in the previous game. And I worry just as much about the Clippers offense as I would about the Suns, who are kind of broken right now. And some of their home road splits, their offense even worse at home, right? Scoring 104 per game. Shooting 34% from three. And by the way, the Celtics, since Miami kind of established a bit of a blueprint for mixing up coverages, they haven't hit 40% of their threes in any of their last 5 games. They're shooting 34.5 at that point where, they were on that record pace, shooting 41% as a team. And that's kind of the secret sauce, along with the assist to turnover ratio, which has also come down to 23 assists and about 14 turnovers in the last 5. And yeah, I mean, while we don't know what we're going to get from Kawhi and PG, they at least do have a chance to match up on Jalen and Jason if they want to use this as kind of a playoff primer. Like we've been saying, they haven't really unleashed Kawhi in a tough matchup yet, but maybe they want to see what he can do against the best team in the league. In any case, there's more scenarios here, and Ty Lue being such a good coach who probably has been watching closely what Joe Mazzulla has been doing with the Celtics. He probably has some tricks up his sleeves in order to limit that offense. And then there's also the possibility that the Clippers don't even get 100 because they're just not a very good offensive team, and they have tended to play really slow, except for those last 2 blips that I mentioned where they went over and they actually got blown out by the Kings, but still went under because they had 98.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's if Kawhi's playing, automatically you're just like, all right, probably more defense, less offense. I think we can feel like that's probably the case. I would agree with your logic here that if Kawhi and PG are both playing tonight, like, if they're healthy enough to play and you're not worried about them getting re-injured, they're just playing, especially Kawhi, then who else is better to guard this Celtics team than this Clippers team? There's nobody who has the defensive prowess of PG and Kawhi, size and speed and strength to be able to hang with JB and Jason Tatum. Like, there's nobody else with 2 players that are meant to guard those 2 guys quite like this team. So if they are playing, you hope that there's a bit of a matchup there for them, and that they're hoping that those 2 guys in the game are rangy enough to be able to get out on shooters, handle those 2 guys, and then have everybody else fly around on the shooters and keep Boston from being able to hit 40% once again from 3 on the road. So Nate, let's go ahead and jump into your first NBA player prop for tonight.
Yeah, Kevin Durant, guy we've been riding. I rode him on Friday, and then he got the day off on Saturday, and then Cam Thomas carried the Nets to victory. But now he should be back here in Washington, where he's from, D.C. area, that is, and that's why he's posted great lines against them for the most part. I mean, on top of the fact that they're a bad defensive team that tries to limit threes and points in the paint, and therefore is vulnerable to a godlike mid-range scorer like KD. And in their last 8, the Wiz given up 122 points per 100 possessions. That is one of the worst in the league on the season, allowing the 3rd most points to small forwards, along with the 5th most rebounds and assists. So KD, since joining Brooklyn, averaging 31.5 points, along with 8 rebounds, 6.5 assists on 55, 41, 90 splits against the Wizards. This is his first road appearance, actually, since November 25th, when he just went off in a loss, actually, 36, 9, and 8 on a 42% usage rate. So if the Nets get into a close game, which, as you know, if you've watched the show, we do not ever trust them to cover, and they're -6 here on the road. So I do think it will be a close game. I expect Durant to be filling it up in more ways than one. I mean, 29.5 points is reasonable for sure. I think you're even safer with the 42.5 PRA. He had at least 10 rebounds and assists in 13 straight before going 34-4-4 against Atlanta. And that's probably why Jacques Vaughn realized he had to give him some rest if he's not boarding and facilitating. He doesn't have the energy for that. But yeah, I think he gets back to those elite round stat lines in addition to scoring 30 points here.
Yeah, that feels right. I mean, that's been the key, I think, in the difference in terms of their wins and losses as well, to a degree, is how much is KD doing on top of scoring? To be honest, because they need help in a lot of different ways at times with their lack of depth. But yeah, I'm never going to tell you not to take a KD over, especially in a situation where the Nets are playing a lot better right now, and this Wizards team has been sliding on defense a ton. So completely with that one, I'm going to go with Ant-Man for our next one. I think there's a lot of ways to look at how to bet Ant-Man here. 25.5 points. I think some of his props are a little bit affected by the really good game he had against Portland just this last one, as they're doing one of these home just 2 in a row in the same building. Minnesota at Portland twice in a row. Did really super well, obviously, in terms of that last game there with his stats 26, 6, and 7. The points are at 25.5. The points and assists are at 30.5. And I think either of those or the points, rebounds, and assists, he's been filling it up. In all different categories. The one time he's really failed to have the 30 points and assists in the last roughly 5 games or so was in that Utah game that was just an ugly game for him all around, with his shooting splits at like 21-33. It was just a completely off night in a Utah team that was clearly doubling him and taking him out of the game. But against this Portland team, his last six versus Portland, which is all the games in his career. It's only his second year in the league, but 28.5 a game, 5.8 rebounds, and 2.7 assists in that time frame. 32% usage and 115 individual offensive rating against this team. And his last 6 without Cat as well. 25 points a game, basically 6 boards and 5 assists, right? And like I said, 26, 6, and 7 at Portland on Saturday a couple nights ago. So I don't see why much would change. Portland not very good at defending. I guess you would call it the shooting guard position for Ant. Although he and D'Lo, it's just really your turn, my turn in terms of setting up offense. There's not much setting up of offense on this Timberwolves teams. There's a lot of I'll take the ball and have it in my hands. So with that usage rate as high as it is without Cat, you can feel good about the 26 points. I think the points and assists is probably a little bit better than adding the rebounds in there. I'm a little bit skeptical of the rebounds and assists itself, which is at for him it's 10.5, and to go under is -110. Just like going over on that is, I actually feel a little bit better about the under on that. Ant hasn't gotten more than 10 rebounds and assists. He's done it twice in his last 6 games, but those were against teams like Indiana, and he did do it against Portland. But that's what I'm a little bit weary about is just him doing that exact same thing again. But I think the points are going to be something that he has to come by, the 25.5. So I feel really good about that. I don't mind adding the assists, but not both the rebounds and assists, to be honest, because I don't think there's a bevy of those coming for him once more.
I mean, I do think his production's ramping up as he gets into shape here across the board. And as things kind of open up without Cat out there, it's definitely more reliable. You see his stat lines pretty much at 25 or higher. He had that blip against Utah. But I mean, Portland, while their wing defense is really good, their actual backcourt is still the most vulnerable thing. And that's why I think we can rely on Ant, and we can rely on the other side of the ball, Simons and Dame Lillard continuing to cook against Minnesota, which was just awful on the road last year. Their interior defense a little bit better now with Rudy Gobert, but their perimeter defense still awful, giving up the most 3-pointers at the 4th highest percentage, allowing the 7th most points to shooting guards in the last 7, partially because Simons went off for 31 on Saturday when they faced them. His prop at 22.5 points, much more generous than Dame Lillard at 27.5. And I also like 25 in a win for Simons is plus 235. He is a good bellwether for this team in terms of, yes, they have Dame back, but do they have that second scorer that can keep defenses honest? And Simons has been that. I mean, he has plenty of experience now being the guy. And when Dame's in there, he's still producing at a very high rate. He's actually been more efficient than Damian Lillard at home this season, averaging a little bit more despite the lower usage, 24 points per game, shooting 43% from deep. And yeah, then I look at, again, to your point on Ant, Portland has the 3rd worst opponent 3-point percentage at home. So I do expect, more of the same. Like you said, I worry that we're going to get more of the same, but I think the matchup is there for these hot shooting guards to have big line, similar lines, if not bigger, in the same matchup.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love Anthony Simons so much. And I love the fact that Dame's come back and he's still showing that he can score 31 sitting alongside him. It's not really like you got to worry that if he's going to get 20 to 25 with Dame in there now. It's definitely a two-guard backcourt there. And I think he's getting the trust that he needs to be able to really be a solid number 2 scorer on a playoff team right now, on a very good team that I think could make noise down the stretch as well, continue to do so. So I do like them to win this game. So anything that you want to do player performance double wise, like I'm with you on that one. So I'm going to finish player props here with Mr. Hero, Tyler Hero here, taking on one of the worst defensive teams in the league in the Pacers. I've got his points prop at 20.5. I would take that. It's only it's about minus 120 on FanDuel. That's the best place I found for that prop there for him to get 21. Threes is 2.5. Over 2.5 but it's minus 135 or minus 125 on FanDuel as well. So I'm looking at a few alternates, to be honest with you. I would take the points and be fine with the minus 120 at 20.5 for Tyler Hero. I would also consider 25 and a win for Tyler. I think 20 for him to just get 25 is plus 180, but 25 and a win in those player performance levels is plus 310 for Hero. There's going to be some points in this game for sure. I mean, Tyler Hero, especially in his last 7, has been playing absolutely well for this team. 22.5 points a game, 7.5 boards. His player prop right now for rebounds is at 6.5. 6 assists in that time frame as well. So he's filling it up for Miami all over the place with roughly a 28% usage rate and the ball in his hands a ton. He's shooting roughly 18 field goal attempts a game, shooting about 7.5, 8 threes a game. So I like the usage rate in the attempts he's getting up and the points that he's scoring. You look at what he's done in his last 4 against the Pacers, dating back to the beginning of last season. 26 points a game, 5 boards, and 3 assists in that time frame. Also throwing in a few threes there, almost 4 threes made on 8.5 attempts, shooting 45% from deep against this team, which is just bad on defense, right? Like bottom 5 in terms of opponent 3-point percentage, 3-point makes for Indiana, and they're giving up the third most points and assists combined to shooting guards, which is however you want to consider Hero. Sometimes he's got the ball in his hand, point guard-ish. Sometimes Bam has the ball in his hands, point guard-ish. I don't really care about that. It's more about him being sort of like a perimeter shooting guard who can score from all over the 3-point line. It's not like he just stands at the top or on the wing. He's coming at you from all different angles. Just really like what I'm seeing from him right now, and I continue, especially with Jimmy Butler and the way that he's been either not playing or scoring less than 20 points over the course of his last 8 games. I think he has 2 20-point games in that time frame. Like, this is the best offensive player on this team, and this is the guy that's going to continue to get points for them. And there's going to be a few more points in this game than most normal Miami games, as they are on the road and they're playing the Pacers, who score a ton at home as well. So there's going to be points in this game. I like 25 and a win for Hero at plus 310. The only thing I don't trust is are the fucking Heat going to try and are they going to win? That's the only thing I don't know, because they just lost to the Spurs and have been putting up some pretty ugly performances against teams that are not as good as them.
Yeah, I actually like Jimmy Butler under 20.5 points to what you're saying. That, I mean, he scored 30 and they lost last time out, and I think he needs to impact the game in different ways. I think he knows that, and that means letting Hero take on much more of the scoring load. I'm sure there's a correlation there. When Butler scores less, that Hero will score more. So, I mean, that might be an interesting same-game parlay to get Butler under and the Heat win, but something like that. I mean, I think the safest bet here is, Tyler Hero, 21 points, is, like you said, averaging 22.5 his last 7.
Yeah, for sure. That's an easy one, and I'm just trying to find ways to juice that up a bit, because I think Tyler's going to have a pretty big night tonight. And the 2.5 threes is way too small. I just don't love the minus 130 odds. So if you want to, go ahead and sell a 3 there, get an alternate line, and get over 3.5, you're probably a lot closer to plus money there. So that is all the time we have for you in this one, though. Make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along with us. We are coming back to you each and every weekday this regular season. So until we see you next, happy betting.